Hi, this is Tyson from Dinosaur Dog Studio, and today we're going to talk about mix bus processing. So this is right after the static mix is done, like we talked about last week, and we're diving into what type of processing I do right off the bat on the mix bus to really set your mix up for success for the remaining time that you're going to spend with it. I have a couple tricks up my sleeve that's going to really help you in getting a quick, good EQ balance on the mix bus, as well as some good tips on compression. So we're going to go over both of those today. With that said, if you want to learn more about me and to see if I'm actually trustworthy in telling you how you should be processing your mix bus, you can go to dinosaurdogstudio.com to learn more about me and listen to my portfolio to see if my songs actually sound good. I don't know. With that said, let's dive into mix bus processing. What I have here is a song that I've just finished the static mix for. So I've set all my volume balances, and now I am ready to begin my strategy of top-down mixing. So starting in the mix bus and then moving down towards the individual tracks instead of starting from the individual tracks upwards. So I'm starting on the mix bus. This is a critical part of the mixing process, having the mix bus processing done correctly right up front, because if I mess this up, I'm impacting everything down below. So the changes I'm going to make are going to be massive, but I know that if I get this right, it's going to make the rest of my mix so much easier. So let's dive into that. I'm going to let you listen to the song just really quick so you can get kind of an idea of where we're at here, and then we'll dive into the actual processing. Okay, so that's the chorus. I like to pick the loudest part of the song or a very loud part of the song to have a good judge of what that top is going to be like for my mix bus processing itself. So step one is we actually have to add another audio track here, and I'll drag it up to the top here. And we're gonna add some references. So this is gonna be reference 1, reference 2. I'm just gonna use these two here. Go find our references. Okay, so now I have my two references in here. Okay, so those are my two references. Those are similar styles to the song I'm mixing, so I kind of want a similar vibe. So the first step in mix bus processing is to dial in our compression. So I'm not actually going to use our references too much for this. I just want them there for the EQ stage. But first step is to add some mix bus compression. So I'm going to add a compressor here. Compressor. And I'm going to use this compressor. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to set up my compressor so that I can catch all of the peaks. So probably the kick and the snare are going to be the largest driver of the compression on the mix bus. So I'm going to find those spots where the kick and the snare really poking out of the mix a little bit, and that's really what the compressor is going to be grabbing onto. So I'm going to find those first. I'm going to reset my attack and release to the fastest settings, my ratio to the highest setting possible, my need to 0, and I'm going to go find those peaks. So let's go at that. As you can see, the needle is returning all the way back to 0 right after the hit, which is exactly what I'm looking for. So I want to be able to return to 0. you notice when I pushed it a little bit, towards like minus 13 and 14 decibels on the threshold, it didn't actually return back to 0. So therefore I knew that I was capturing those valleys in between the peaks. So I'm just capturing the peaks right now. So that's good. Now I'm going to go ahead and set my attack and release. What I want on this is going to be a groovy type compression, which is going to be a slower attack and a faster release. So that's what I'm aiming for. I'm going to focus on my attack first, and then I'll set the release. So if you noticed, when I pull out the release a long time, it gets that really like pumpy feeling. I'm not necessarily going for that at all. I don't want this whole mix to pump. I just want it to groove a little bit more. And so that's really the goal of my compression, is not to really impact the tone that much. I just want to emphasize what kind of dynamics already exist in the song. So I'm going to stick with that like much shorter release than... when I went up to about 100 milliseconds, you could feel the pumping. I'm going to go ahead and do that again just so you can focus on that. You can really hear it in the cymbals of the drums if you listen to those. That's pretty close with my attack and release, what I want those at. So I'm going to adjust my ratio. I'm going to go all the way back to 1. I'm just going to slowly add it in until it feels right there. I'm going to A-B it again for you, but what I want you to do is pay attention to the groove and the feeling of the whole mix when I add the compression in, because before I add it in, it's kind of flat, kind of boring, but right when I add that compression in and enable it, even though I'm only getting maybe a decibel of gain reduction, it's really just causing the whole thing to really jive together a lot more. So even though it's a very small change, it's impacting the entire mix and really adding a lot of character and movement to the entire mix. So I'm going to turn this off so you can hear it before, and then I'm going to turn it on about halfway through the chorus. hopefully you can hear that, that just, it gels so much more. Now our next step is to actually add some EQ to our mix bus processing. This is taking a while, so I might have to split this in 2 videos. I'm not sure. Now that we've set our compression, now I want to set my EQ. So I'm just gonna use a normal EQ here, just normal channel EQ. But before I do that, I'm going to get a reference from my references using a match EQ. So if you watch my mastering video, how to get your first master, it's a very similar process, but this is to set my mix bus EQ up well before I even start really diving into the bulk of the mix itself, so that I can be cognizant, and I'll have to make less changes, because if it's, you know, say my mix is a bit muddy, which this one kind of is, then I'll actually be able to fix a lot of that stuff on the mix bus and make just smaller adjustments on the individual tracks themselves, instead of having to boost, you know, 5 or 10 dB and cut and make massive cuts. I can just adjust that already on the mix bus itself, so it makes the rest of the mix a whole lot easier. Okay, so with that said, let's pull up on my match EQ here. Match EQ. And so I'm going to get just a baseline of what we're currently at. Okay, and then now I'm going to play both my references simultaneously to get an average of where the references really exist sonically. All right, and then let's see where they land. So I'm actually not, there's not too many dramatic changes, which is nice. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn that off, and I'm going to recreate this curve with my other EQ. Let's make that a little smaller so I can see it. So I'm not going to recreate it exactly, but it's going to be just a kind of a general idea of what that curve looks like. So I can fix, you know, probably the major problem areas that I have in my mix without adjusting it too much here. Okay, so here's before, and I'll A/B it a little bit here, so you can hear the difference. Just notice the kind of the clarity that it brings, and really I didn't have to do much work. I didn't have to really analyze my song and think about what areas needed to be boosted or cut. I just copied what the references told me, and it really makes a huge difference in getting me in the right direction. So I might adjust this a little bit more, but just generally speaking, it's giving me a great ballpark to exist in well before I have to do any technical or really analytical work by myself, essentially. All right, and there you have it. So we've done both compression and EQ on our mix bus. And so now I'm ready to dive into the rest of the mix. With that said, hope you learned something today, and I'll see you next time.